Elijah Zane hadn't stepped foot on the campus of Westboro University in over 10 years, and he definitely hadn't expected his chest to tighten the second he saw her. Olivia Rivers. She stood across the quad, laughing with two women he didn't recognize, a glass of champagne in one hand and a soft pink dress hugging her curves like it had been made just for her. The same Olivia he'd barely noticed in college. The one who used to sit 2 rows behind him in business ethics class, always wearing oversized sweaters and scribbling in notebooks he never bothered to ask about. He stared longer than he should have. Elijah Zane, someone called behind him. Westboro's golden boy returns. He forced a polite grin and turned to shake hands, but his mind was stuck on the woman across the lawn. She looked different, but not in the obvious surface-level way. She moved differently, confident, like she belonged, and now he couldn't look away. The reunion was hosted in the newly renovated Alumni Hall, complete with white-gloved servers and string quartet music that didn't match the buzz of excitement in the air. Elijah's name carried weight, now CEO of Zane Tech, one of the fastest-growing AI firms in the country. He was used to people recognizing him, leaning in to ask questions, pretending to have known him back then. But that night, none of it landed, because Olivia Rivers had just walked into the ballroom. She hadn't seen him yet. She was too busy scanning the room, her eyes curious, her mouth soft. She paused at the name tag table, her fingers brushing through the cards until she found hers. When she pinned it to her dress, Elijah finally moved. He crossed the room without thinking. "Olivia," he said, stopping just a few feet away. She turned slowly, her eyes locking with his, brown and warm with a flicker of surprise. "Elijah," she said, her voice calm but unreadable, "didn't expect to see you here." He tried not to let her tone shake him. "Didn't expect to see you either," he laughed awkwardly. "You look different?" "Yeah," she said, tilting her head. "I stopped hiding." He wasn't sure what to say to that, and for a moment she just sipped her champagne and looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. "You remember me?" she asked. "Of course I do." He nodded, a little too fast. "We had business ethics together. And public speaking second semester senior year," she raised a brow. "And yet you never said more than 3 words to me." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I'm not mad," she added, lips curving slightly. "Just surprised you remember." "I remember now," he said quietly. "You weren't easy to forget, I just didn't see it then." She didn't reply, just looked at him for a long time before a woman called her name from across the room. "I should go say hi," Olivia said, nodding toward the group. "Wait," Elijah said quickly. "Would you have dinner with me sometime?" She blinked. "Dinner? Yeah, I'd like to catch up, actually talk." She paused, then shrugged. "Sure, why not?" And just like that, he was hooked. 3 nights later, Elijah reserved a private table at one of Manhattan's most exclusive rooftop restaurants. The host greeted him by name. The waiter didn't even bring a menu, just asked for confirmation of the 7-course chef's tasting he'd pre-arranged. When Olivia arrived, she wore a navy dress and a look of amused hesitation. "This is a lot," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. He poured her a glass of wine himself. "I figured it was time I stopped ignoring you," she laughed, and the sound went straight to his chest. "I'm surprised you remember me at all," she said. "Back then I was invisible." "You weren't," he said. "I just didn't know how to look past myself." She stared at him. "I mean it," Elijah added. "I was so focused on my own path I didn't see anyone else. Especially not the girl who actually had something to say." Olivia looked down at her wine, then back at him. "You really changed." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I just woke up." Over dinner, she told him about her life. After college, she'd gotten a master's in nonprofit management, worked with various women's advocacy groups, and recently launched her own community program. She wasn't flashy about it, just honest, passionate, real. Elijah couldn't stop watching her. Every word, every smile, every opinion she didn't hesitate to voice, it pulled him deeper. When dessert came out, individual chocolate soufflés with edible gold, she raised a brow. "This part necessary?" she asked, poking the gold with her spoon. He grinned. I told the chef to impress you. Trying to make up for 4 years of ignoring me, at least starting, she laughed, but her eyes softened. You're different than I expected, Elijah. Good different? Yeah, she said, smiling. Good different? After dinner, he walked her to her apartment. It was quiet on the street, the kind of New York night where everything felt just a little slower, a little more possible. She stopped outside her building and turned to him. You really didn't remember me until the reunion, she asked. He hesitated. I remembered your name, I just didn't remember how it felt to be around you, she studied him. And now I can't stop thinking about you. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she leaned in and kissed him. Soft, slow. Like maybe she'd been thinking about him too. When they pulled apart, she smiled faintly. Good night, Elijah. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't want the night to end. Elijah didn't make a habit of showing up unannounced. But that didn't stop him from standing on the sidewalk outside the brick building that housed Olivia's office, holding a coffee carrier with 2 oat milk lattes and a knot of nerves twisting in his gut. He'd sent a message through her assistant earlier that morning, asking if she had 10 minutes. When the reply came back with a time and an address, he left his penthouse without hesitation. Now, as he buzzed the intercom, he tried not to overthink the fact that he hadn't done something like this for anyone in years. A woman with cropped hair and gold hoop earrings opened the front door. You Elijah? She asked, eyeing the coffees. I am, she's upstairs. Turn left at the top, and be careful, our printer's been making smoke lately. He offered a half laugh and climbed the stairs 2 at a time, the scent of ink and second-hand books thick in the air. Olivia's door was open. She stood with her back to him, pinning something to a corkboard lined with flyers and photos of community events. I brought peace offerings, he said. She turned, eyes flicking to the cups. If that's what I think it is, you might be forgiven for interrupting my day. He handed her a cup. Oat milk, no sweetener. She took it, her expression unreadable. You remembered. I paid attention. Olivia gestured to the worn couch near her desk and sat down beside a stack of grant proposals. This place is chaotic, she said. But it's mine. I like it, he said, letting his gaze drift over the mismatched chairs and the framed quote above her desk that read, If you wait for perfect, you'll wait forever. So, she said, crossing her legs. Are you here because you like the coffee or because you couldn't stop thinking about that kiss? He didn't answer right away. I'm here because I've never met anyone who made me want to be better in one conversation, he said. And because I don't want this to be a one-time thing. She studied him for a long moment. You always say things like that, like they're facts. I say what I mean, always. I used to think people like you weren't real, Olivia said. Suits, polished words, too much certainty. But now I'm not so sure. I'm not polished, Elijah said. I just learned how to hide the mess. She leaned back slightly. And what mess is that? I built a company from nothing. I've had investors walk out on me mid-meeting, competitors try to buy me out, and people I trusted stab me in the back for a bigger slice. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I forgot what it meant to want something that didn't come with a price tag. Olivia's brow lifted, but she didn't interrupt. I'm not here to impress you, he continued. I'm here because I liked sitting across from you, watching you light up when you talked about the work you're doing. And I've spent too long surrounded by people who only talk about margins and exits. She took a long sip of her coffee, then looked up at him. I don't impress easy, she said. I wasn't asking you to be. Her eyes didn't leave his. You're used to getting what you want, aren't you? I'm used to negotiating for it, he said. But I've never offered someone this much without knowing where it'll land. She stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the narrow street below. I worked hard to build this, she said. I wasn't always this version of myself. You missed the years I spent proving I wasn't just someone people overlooked. I didn't miss them, Elijah said. I just wasn't smart enough to see them. Silence stretched between them. Then Olivia turned, arms crossed. I'm not looking to be someone's redemption story, she said. I'm not looking to be saved, he replied. A muscle ticked in her jaw, then she nodded once. Fine, one more dinner. But next time we eat somewhere normal, no rooftop orchestras, he grinned. Deal. Just don't expect paper menus, I draw the line there. She rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at her lips. Later that evening, Elijah stepped into the elevator of his building, greeted by the familiar hush of wealth, the scent of polished marble, the quiet hum of recessed lighting, the gold-plated buttons that took him to the top floor. When he entered his penthouse, his assistant was waiting. An envelope sat on the kitchen counter, marked with his lawyer's handwriting. "Is this the final agreement for the acquisition?" Elijah asked, loosening his tie. "Yes," she said, "and the board wants your answer before Friday." He stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. "Tell them I'll read it tomorrow." The assistant nodded and left. Alone, Elijah walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and stared out at the skyline. For the first time in a long time, the city didn't feel like all there was. Something else was pulling him now, and it wasn't power or profit. It was her. Elijah wasn't used to feeling out of his depth. But as he stood in the middle of a community rec center in Harlem, surrounded by handmade banners and the smell of cinnamon from a bake sale table, he realized Olivia Rivers had a way of pulling him into places where his tailored suits and curated confidence didn't mean a thing. She spotted him from across the gymnasium and walked over, clipboard in hand, her hair pulled into a low twist and a pen tucked behind her ear. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she said, her expression unreadable. "You invited me." "I came." "Well," she said, glancing around at the folding chairs and paper streamers, "this isn't exactly your usual scene." "I didn't come for the scene," Elijah said. "I came for you." Olivia didn't respond immediately. Instead, she handed him a name tag and gestured toward the back wall, where volunteers were sorting canned goods into boxes. "If you're staying, you work." He took the tag and followed her, rolling up his sleeves as she introduced him to a group of teenagers loading crates. "This is Elijah. He's new, don't go easy on him." A boy with a cast on his wrist handed Elijah a clipboard. "You know how to count." "Just barely," Elijah said, and the kid laughed. For the next hour, Olivia didn't look at him once. She floated between stations, answering questions, giving directions, and somehow managing to make everyone feel seen. Elijah watched her with a quiet intensity, sorting cans and breaking down boxes while his thoughts raced faster than his hands. It wasn't the chaos or the noise that threw him. It was how seamlessly she fit into all of it, how she didn't need applause or attention to lead. She just did. When the last box was taped shut and the volunteers began trickling out, Olivia finally walked over to where he stood, wiping his hands on a towel. "You survived," she said, barely. "I think I have a permanent dent in my thumb from that tape gun." She smiled faintly, then leaned against the table beside him. "You didn't have to come here, I know. So why did you?" "Because I wanted to see you in your world," Elijah said. "And because I needed to know if I could fit into it." Olivia looked at him, her expression flickering with something softer than before. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Back then, I thought you were all polish and ambition, and maybe you were, but now—" "I don't know. I don't either," he admitted, "but I'm starting to figure it out." They stood in silence as the last of the volunteers left, the gym now quiet except for the distant hum of traffic outside. "This place matters to you," Elijah said quietly. "It does. But it's not just about the programs, it's about the people who show up." She turned toward him. "Most of them have been let down more times than I can count, so when someone says they'll be there and actually shows up, that means something." Elijah nodded. "I want to keep showing up." She studied him, arms crossed now, but her posture relaxed. "I had a meeting with a potential donor last week," she said. "He offered a 6-figure check, but he wanted naming rights and creative control over the curriculum." "What did you say?" I told him no. He tilted his head. "That's a hard check to walk away from. It would have changed everything." "And not in a good way." Elijah looked at her, really looked at her. "You don't compromise easily. Not when it matters." He stepped closer, the air between them shifting. "Neither do I," he said. But I'm starting to think I've been compromising in all the wrong places. Her eyes didn't leave his. What do you mean? I've spent years building something that looks perfect from the outside, but on the inside, it's hollow in places I didn't notice until I met you. Olivia's breath caught. She didn't speak, just watched him with a cautious intensity. I'm not asking you to fix it, Elijah said. I'm just asking for the chance to be someone who deserves to stand beside you in this world. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded packet of papers. What's this? A proposal, he said. Not the kind you're used to, no strings, no branding, just support, quiet, consistent, and on your terms. She opened it slowly, scanning the contents. Elijah, this is, I know, your offering to fully fund the expansion. Anonymously, he said. No recognition, no control, just belief in what you're doing. She looked up at him, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. Why? Because I want you to know I see you now, not from across a classroom or a ballroom, but here, in the place you built. Her throat worked, but she didn't speak. He stepped back, giving her space. You don't have to say anything now, just think about it. As he turned to leave, she called his name, Elijah. He stopped. I don't want to be impressed by you, she said. I want to trust you. He met her gaze. Then I'll keep showing up until you do. The next morning, Elijah sat in his office, staring out the window as the city stretched out below him. His assistant buzzed in, board meeting in 15, push it. There was a pause. Sir, reschedule everything today. Understood. He leaned back in his chair and pulled out his phone, not to call. Just to look at the message Olivia had sent the night before, a photo of the rec center's front door with a single word beneath it, open. Olivia stepped out onto the balcony of Elijah's penthouse, the late afternoon sun casting a golden hue over the skyline. The breeze stirred the hem of her linen blouse, and below them, the city hummed with life. Inside, soft jazz played from a speaker tucked discreetly into a bookshelf, the scent of fresh basil wafting in from the kitchen. You made this, she asked, glancing over her shoulder. Elijah emerged with 2 plates in hand, both layered with lemon herb pasta and roasted vegetables. Let's not get carried away, I supervised. She took a plate, grinning. You supervised your private chef. I sliced exactly 2 cherry tomatoes, nearly lost a finger. Olivia laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. They sat at the small bistro table he'd set up on the terrace, the city stretching endlessly around them, but for once, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the 2 of them. He watched her for a moment as she twirled a forkful of pasta. You always eat this slow? Only when it's laced with suspicion, she said. You've been quiet since I got here. I've been thinking, Elijah said, and that's usually dangerous. That's comforting. He set his fork down. I turned down the acquisition, she blinked. The one you said could triple your valuation, he nodded. I read the proposal again and realized the only thing it offered was more noise, more meetings, more people telling me what I should care about. And what do you care about? He met her gaze. Waking up and not needing to prove anything to anyone, building something that doesn't just make money but means something, and you, her breath caught. I used to think success was about control, he continued, but lately I've realized it's about freedom. And I've never felt freer than when I'm near you. She set her fork down slowly. That's a lot for a Tuesday. I know. He reached into his pocket and placed a small, square box on the table. Her eyes widened. What is that? Not what you think, he said quickly. It's not a ring. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside rested a single gold key on a velvet cushion. To your place? She asked. To this one, he said. Not as a gesture, not as a move and invitation, just access, if you need to breathe, if you want to write your next grant proposal with a view. If you want a place that's yours as much as mine. Olivia stared at the key for a long moment. You don't do anything halfway, do you? No, Elijah said. Not with you. She closed the box gently. You're serious. I'm in love with you. The words landed heavy and clear between them, unflinching in their honesty. She stood up abruptly, walking to the edge of the balcony. The sun caught her profile, casting her in gold. She didn't speak for so long, Elijah feared he'd overstepped. Then she turned around. "I used to think love was something I had to earn," she said. "That I had to be louder, smarter, more visible just to be worthy of it." He started to speak, but she held up a hand. "But with you." Her voice broke slightly. "You see me without asking me to prove anything. And that scares me more than anything ever has." He rose slowly. "Does it scare you enough to walk away?" "No," relief flooded his chest. "It scares me enough to say it back," Olivia said. "I love you, Elijah." He crossed the space between them in 4 strides, catching her face in his hands and kissing her slowly, reverently, like he'd waited years for it. Because in some ways he had. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Is this real?" she whispered. "It is," he said, "and it's only the beginning." Later that week, Elijah stood beside Olivia at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new program expansion. She wore a navy dress and a quiet smile, and when she spoke to the crowd, she didn't mention the anonymous donor. She didn't have to. The pride in Elijah's eyes said everything. After the ceremony, she pulled him aside under the string lights hanging across the courtyard. "They keep asking who funded it," she said. "Tell them it was someone who finally learned how to look." She smiled and laced her fingers through his. "You know, I never imagined you'd be the one. I never imagined I'd be lucky enough for you to give me a second chance." They stood in silence for a moment, the crowd dispersing around them, the night settling in soft and sure. "Come home with me?" he asked. She nodded. "Always." And as they walked away hand in hand, toward a future neither of them had planned but both of them had finally chosen, the city lights blinked softly behind them. Not to dazzle or distract, just to bear witness to a love that had waited, grown, and finally arrived. The invitation had arrived embossed in deep green with gold lettering, understated yet unmistakably elegant. Elijah read it twice before setting it down beside his espresso. Olivia was across the table, barefoot in one of his shirts, her legs tucked up beneath her as she read through a draft proposal for a city grant initiative. "Your friend's wedding is in 2 weeks," he said, tapping the card. She glanced over, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Maya. We were roommates during grad school. I haven't seen her in a few years. Destination: Charleston, Magnolia House. She's marrying a sculptor. The whole weekend is supposed to be artistically bohemian with vintage undertones, whatever that means." Elijah leaned back, watching her. "So I need to pack linen and develop a taste for spoken-word poetry. You'll survive," she said, eyes twinkling. "But it's going to be full of people who knew me before I had any of this figured out. I want to know that version of you too." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Just remember, they're not impressed by money or titles. One of them once ran a sustainable sock company out of a treehouse." Noted. 2 weeks later, Elijah stood outside the ivy-draped gates of Magnolia House, a 17th-century estate with wraparound porches and wild gardens. Olivia emerged from the car in a flowing green dress, her hand slipping easily into his. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled, no tie. She'd insisted on no tie. Inside, the rehearsal dinner buzzed with laughter and candlelight. Mason jars of sweet tea clinked against vintage wine glasses, and a jazz trio played beneath a tangle of string lights. Olivia moved through the crowd with practiced ease, greeting old friends, introducing Elijah without ceremony. No one asked what he did. No one seemed to care. It was the first time in years he'd been in a room where no one looked at him with calculation. Later, they sat on the porch steps, plates balanced on their knees. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The version of your life before all of this. I miss the freedom of not needing everything to make sense," she said. "But I don't miss the uncertainty," he nodded slowly. "I used to think certainty was the goal, now I'm not so sure." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You don't need to be sure, you just need to be honest." "I am. With you, I always will be." The next day, they stood together under the low branches of a magnolia tree as Maya walked down the aisle. Elijah caught Olivia watching the ceremony with a quiet, contemplative expression. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded. Just thinking about, she glanced up at him, her voice low. How love looks different when it's real, less firework, more gravity. Elijah reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. You're the only thing keeping me grounded these days. After the ceremony, while dancers moved barefoot across the lawn and lanterns swayed in the trees, Elijah pulled Olivia away from the crowd. There's something I want to ask you, he said. She narrowed her eyes playfully. Is this where you propose with a ring made of recycled metal and a line of poetry? He exhaled a laugh and shook his head. Not yet, but I do want to ask you something important. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document, slipping it into her hands. She opened it slowly. Her eyes scanned the title, then widened. This is a deed. I bought the building where your program runs, he said, and I had it transferred into your name completely. It's yours now. She stared at him, stunned. No conditions, no contracts, just yours. Forever. Her eyes filled suddenly and she looked away, blinking quickly. You didn't need to do that. I wanted to, because I believe in what you've built, and I believe in you. She threw her arms around his neck, holding him tighter than she ever had. You changed everything. He pulled back just enough to look at her. No, you did. Months passed. The expansion opened 2 new wings. A literacy program for single mothers, a mentorship initiative for high school girls entering STEM fields. Olivia's name was never on the building, but the kids called it Miss O's place anyway. Elijah split his time between boardrooms and volunteer hours, stepping back from the international expansion to focus on domestic impact. He even started mentoring startup founders from underserved communities, quietly funding their ideas without fanfare. They moved into a brownstone in Brooklyn, a compromise between her love of character and his need for space. The walls were lined with a mix of abstract art and framed newspaper clippings of Olivia's work. Their mornings filled with the clatter of coffee mugs and quiet debates about which farmer's market had the best peaches. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled across the skyline and the fireplace crackled in the living room, Olivia curled up next to Elijah on the couch. You know what I realized today, she said, tracing a circle on his wrist. What? That I don't feel like I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop anymore. For the first time, I'm not holding my breath. He turned toward her, brushing his thumb over her cheek. That's how I knew I loved you. When I stopped trying to outrun everything and just wanted to stay, she smiled, eyes shining. So stay. I already am. They didn't need a wedding, though they had one anyway. Small, just 25 people, in the garden behind the brownstone, no suits, no speeches. Just promises whispered under fairy lights, and a kiss that felt like the beginning of everything they never knew they were missing. A year later, Olivia stood on a stage at the Women in Leadership Summit, accepting an award for innovation in community development. As the crowd applauded, she looked out and found Elijah standing in the back of the room, his hands in his pockets, pride etched across his face. Afterward, he wrapped his arm around her waist and kissed her temple. Still not impressed, he teased. She turned toward him with a radiant smile. No. I'm in awe. They walked out together into a city that once felt too large to hold the kind of love they'd found, but now it felt like home. Every street, every light, every quiet moment between them, and in the years that followed, they never stopped building. A life, a legacy. And a love that was no longer about what they could prove, but everything they could create. Together.